History books show you the maps and the generals, but they rarely show you this. Look at his eyes. This is Jimmy Doyle. He was a drummer boy, a child whose beat provided the rhythm for men marching into the deadliest day in American history. Let's open a rare archive of 29 faces. From 9-year-old soldiers to the secret spies who changed the war, and finally, the last survivors who lived to see the age of airplanes. Stay with me, because the man you'll see at the 8-minute mark, who lost everything but his spirit, will change the way you look at history forever. This is the Civil War, face to face. Even the White House wasn't immune to the soldier fever sweeping the country. This is Tad Lincoln, the president's son, dressed in a custom-made uniform. To him, the war was a game of dress-up, but for the boys just a few years older than him, the game was about to become terrifyingly real. Edward Black. At just 9 years old, Edward Black became the youngest person to ever serve in the U.S. military. Think about that. 9. He should have been learning arithmetic. Instead, he was at the Battle of Shiloh. Look at his posture. He's trying so hard to look like a man, but his hands are still those of a child. Private Orion P. Howe. Orion Howe didn't just serve. He became a legend at the age of 14. During the Battle of Vicksburg, he was shot in the leg while running to ask for more ammunition. He didn't stop. He limped his way to the general, delivered the message, and earned the Medal of Honor. He is the definition of grit. Willie Johnson's story is carved in stone because his sacrifice was too heavy for a child to bear. He was 11. During a chaotic retreat, while other men threw away their equipment to run faster, Willie kept his drum. He was the only one in his unit to bring his equipment back. For that, Abraham Lincoln himself gave him the Medal of Honor. Captain James S. West. By the time we see Captain James West, the adventure of the war was beginning to fade. The uniforms are still clean here, the brass is still polished. In 1861, they thought it would be one big parade. They were wrong. A.J. Blue and John Whitehead. Men like A.J. Blue and John Whitehead carried more than just rifles. They carried the weight of their family's survival. Notice the knives and the swords. These weren't just for show. In the early days, the fighting was close, personal, and brutal. John DuPonte. John DuPonte stares into the lens with a look of quiet defiance. This is the face of the rank and file, the men who marched 20 miles a day on salt pork and hardtack, only to sleep in the mud. He is the backbone of the Union. We've seen the pride of the soldiers, but the camera also captured what the newspapers refused to print. In this next section, we go inside the hospitals. Warning! These images show the invisible wounds and one man's invention that changed medicine forever. Camp Letterman and Operating Tent. This is Camp Letterman, the place where the glory of Gettysburg came to die. Imagine the sound. Thousands of men in these tents, screaming in the summer heat. In the operating tent, surgeons worked until they were covered in blood to their elbows. There were no antibiotics, only the saw and the bandage. Cornelia Hancock and Rebecca Lane Pennypacker. The men were saved not just by doctors, but by the angels of the battlefield. Cornelia Hancock was rejected at first because she was too young and pretty to be a nurse. She went anyway. She and Rebecca Pennypacker held the hands of the dying when no one else would. They were the last bit of humanity in a world gone mad. Wounded soldiers on cots. Look at the rows of beds. This was the reality of the 1860s. A wound to the arm or leg almost always meant amputation. Disease killed more men than bullets ever did. These men were waiting for a miracle that often never came. Bentley, Wilbur, and Spots. These men, Bentley, Wilbur, and Spots, posed for these photos for a heartbreaking reason. These weren't souvenirs. They were medical evidence. The government needed proof of their injuries to process their pensions. Look at Israel Spots. He survived the trauma of the field, but he would carry the scars of the war on his body for the rest of his life. Samuel H. Decker. This is the man I told you about. Samuel Decker, the man who refused to be broken. Decker lost both his arms to a cannon blast. In 1862, that was a death sentence for your livelihood. But Decker was a genius. He designed and built his own prosthetic arms. He became an official in the Treasury Department and proved that while the war could take his limbs, it couldn't take his dignity. But while the battles raged, a second war was being fought in the shadows, a war for freedom. Coming up, the woman the Confederates feared most, and the soldiers who fought for a country that hadn't yet given them full rights. Harriet Tubman. You know her as the conductor of the Underground Railroad, but here, she is a soldier. Harriet Tubman was a spy, a scout, and the first woman to lead an armed assault during the Civil War. She led the Combahee River Raid, freeing over 700 people in a single night. She was so effective that the Confederates put a $40,000 bounty on her head. Yet she never lost a single person she led to freedom. This is the face of a true American warrior. Marlboro Jones and Jefferson Shields. The stories of Marlboro Jones and Jefferson Shields remind us that the war was never simple. Caught between two worlds, these men navigated the complex and often cruel realities of the South. Their presence in the archive is a silent testament to the millions whose stories were never recorded. Black Sergeant, Unidentified Soldier, Company E, and Officers 4th USCT. These are the men of the United States Colored Troops, the men who turned the tide of the war. 180,000 African Americans fought for the Union. They fought for the end of slavery, yes, but they also fought for the right to be called men. When you look at the discipline in Company E, you see a group of people who knew exactly what they were fighting for. Pauline Cushman. Pauline Cushman was an actress, but her greatest performance was as a Union spy. She used her charm to get behind Confederate lines, stealing battle plans and maps. She was caught and sentenced to death, only to be saved at the last moment by the arrival of Union troops. She lived a life of pure adrenaline. 1938 reunion. 75 years after the smoke cleared, the ghosts returned to Gettysburg. In 1938, the last surviving veterans, now in their 90s, met one last time. Look at them shaking hands over the stone wall. The hatred had been replaced by a shared memory of a tragedy only they could understand. William Uncle Bill Lundy. We end with William Lundy, a man who lived to see the impossible. Lundy was one of the last living links to the war. He was born in a world of muskets and died in a world of jet engines. When he passed away in the 1950s, the living memory of the Civil War went with him. We started with Jimmy Doyle, the boy with the drum. These 29 faces aren't just old photos. They are us. They are our ancestors, our mistakes, and our triumphs. They remind us that history isn't something that happened to other people. It happened to individuals with names, dreams, and fears. If you could ask one person in these photos a single question, who would it be, and what would you ask? Let's talk in the comments. I'm Antique Visions, and thank you for watching The Unfiltered Truth.